Hello, this is Mike Van Meter. Welcome to the Recovery is Possible podcast. I want to thank you for joining me, and you can reach us at our Facebook site, which is also called Recovery is Possible, or our website, which is vanmeterwellnesssolutions.com. This podcast exists to educate the public about addiction, remove the stigma associated with addiction, and offer help and support to those suffering from addiction. This episode is sponsored by FHE Health, a substance abuse and mental health treatment center specializing in treatment to the first responders' needs, including PTSD, anxiety, and substance use. Take the first steps to a better life today by visiting FHEhealth.com. That's FHEhealth.com. And today, guys, I want to welcome Jeremy Hurd from the Palm Beach County Fire Rescue Department, and he is both a chaplain and an EMS captain. And the reason why we have Jeremy on today is the topic of suicide. And as many of you know, that people that suffer from substance abuse, addiction of any kind, suicide is a big part of that. And it's something that has really been brought to the forefront in my world, this year. There's been some personal experiences that I've had where suicide has been an issue, and it's just a tragedy, an unexplainable tragedy that occurs, and I know that many of you have experienced this as well. And I think that this last year has been something that has really highlighted this particular issue. And I wanted to have Jeremy come in and talk to us about suicide, the causes, the conditions, the issues that are out there, because this is something that's near and dear to his heart, and does a lot of work down there in Florida. So with that, Jeremy, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, you described it pretty well. It's something that always has been an issue that I think for many years we just never really talked about, and we're just talking about in general in the general population. But then as it has kind of come into the spotlight a little more when people talk about depression and attempted suicide, and it becomes a little more mainstream conversation, then you start looking at what it deals with in the first responder fire rescue world, and then you add to that COVID and the shutdown and the job loss, all the different pieces that came to that. And I think a lot of people are starting to talk about the crisis that is mental health, but specifically leading to suicide. And one of the things that we talk about a lot here is just the difference with how we view suicide awareness and the difference in how we talk about it. So even just talking to you today is just a kind of a weird thing for me, because if you had said something to me about, first of all, doing a podcast years ago, I would have asked you probably what it was. And now I have one that I do as well. And then number two, to be talking about suicide awareness really was not even in my world. I'm an EMS captain with Palm Beach County Fire Rescue. I've been working for my department for 17 years. Coming up here in about a week will be my 17-year anniversary. And, we're here to help people. We're here to do our thing. We're here to be paramedics and firefighters and respond to calls and to mitigate emergencies. And yet then you find yourself in the middle of all of it, learning about, in the chaplain role, this volunteer role I do, learning about mental health and mental wellness. And unfortunately, same thing for you. I've come face to face with it because of friends and coworkers who have lost their life to suicide in the last few years. And we have some in neighboring departments who have dealt with some very difficult circumstances. So that's kind of how I got to this point. And it's a privilege to be on your show, because like I said, I would have never thought I'd be talking about this topic, but it's one that needs to be covered.
I think you're like me. This is not something that I ever in my career thought that I would be doing what we're doing here today, a podcast. And I'm like you, about a year ago, I didn't know what a podcast was. And here we are conducting a podcast.
I learned about it a little earlier than that, but not much. So it's a rarity, but it's a good opportunity to talk about things and get out there some information.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad that we're here and we're doing it. And it sounds like you, like me, we ended up in these positions unexpectedly, but we're here because it affected us personally. And chances are, if you're listening to this podcast today, there's a reason why that you're listening to this podcast, because there's someone in your life that may be suffering from this. Maybe you're suffering from some issues that, maybe you're suicidal right now, or having those thoughts right now. And so, Jeremy, maybe just kind of go back to the beginning and walk us through this, because you didn't start in this field, did you? I mean, you're a chaplain, you're with the fire department. So How did we get to where you and I are here today talking about this subject?
Well, I got to tell you, as a young man growing up in Kansas City, Missouri area, and kind of figuring out what I was going to do with my life, decided that I was going to go into ministry. And it's a rare thing for people to probably want to go into at that age, but that's just how I was raised, and it's something I wanted to do. So I actually went and got a ministry degree, taught at a small private school, and worked at a church for a few years out of college, and then ended up shifting over into the not-for-profit fundraising world and American Cancer Society, Muscular Dystrophy Association, and learned some different things there. And then really met some people who encouraged me to be a firefighter. I thought they were crazy. I said, who wants to go into a burning building? And never really had ever considered it. Decided to look into it, and that's a very long story, but basically ended up here and I'm working in this job, and and because of my background, some people had already started calling me Reverend, very lovingly and affectionately, of course, no ridicule at all. And so that was kind of what I was known as. And so I, just kind of kept doing my thing. And a few years into the job, said, hey, do we have a chaplain program? And Palm Beach County Fire Rescue is very large. We had, I don't know what the numbers were at the time, but we had about 1,500 people, very large department. And as a young guy, I really didn't even have a place to do this because with seniority and everything else, I wasn't a part of my plans. But I said, hey, would you be interested in starting one? And she said, yeah, we'd like to. So I started the process of beginning a clergy, basically is what I was going to do. And I was going to become the chaplain liaison and get local clergy to help and come in when we needed them. So when somebody in a certain battalion had an issue, we'd find out what their background was and connect them with the local priest or rabbi or pastor, whoever it needed to be. And through a tragedy, one of our men was shot and killed at lunch on a break from class one day back in 2008, March, right at the beginning of March 2008. They shifted from me being a chaplain liaison to just being the chaplain. And my first act was to basically oversee and run this line of duty death funeral. It had a couple thousand people attending. And so I was kind of brought in very quickly. Fortunately, with my ministry background, I knew about it. And so I shifted into my comfort mode like most of us do. And my comfort mode was the scripture, and my comfort mode was faith, and my comfort mode was the Bible. So people would ask me a question, and I'd go that route and help them from a faith background. If you know anything about firefighters, you know that firefighters, for the most part, have really good hearts and want to do things for people, but don't tend, and I don't want to generalize or over generalize or stereotype, but tend to not do church. And so I found that I wasn't able to be effective if all I was doing was giving them advice from scripture. So I started looking at some other things and started learning that there's this mental health thing that attacks firefighters because of what we see. And I was experiencing the what you see part already. I, in my first few years, ran many of my worst calls that I've still to this day have ever run, and started to see how my faith coped and how my prayer and meditation and just my faith in God helped me, family, all of that. And I noticed there were some firefighters who didn't have that. And I noticed that there were firefighters who turned to other things to try to find that joy and try to find that comfort. And what happened was we also ran some really gruesome, awful scenes that were suicide scenes. So you take kind of all of that combined, and I started to learn that, hey, I need to kind of expand my realm here, my understanding, my knowledge. So I started studying, and I went to take some classes, suicide prevention classes, and got with the military, the Coast Guard, started to learn about some of the specifics and started to realize what a problem it was throughout the country, but also what a problem it was throughout just the fire service and first responder world. And what I found was that in the general civilian population, the numbers were not really accurate because a lot of places just wouldn't ever put cause of death as suicide. They would put something else, such as, heart attack, or which was true, their heart stopped, but the heart stopped because they overdosed on drugs, or
right.
a traumatic incident, like a car colliding with a train. Well, it's because they intentionally ran into the train. So it was a lot of those types of things you started to find made it difficult to track. Well, fire departments and first responders are even more secretive than that because we watch out for our brothers and sisters. So a lot of it was very inaccurate, and I think most of it was very well intentioned. The idea was we want to protect these people, and but real numbers didn't get out. And so I remember taking a class with Dan DeGrice, who is he runs there's a clinic up in Rockford, Illinois, and he's a retired battalion chief with Chicago. And he had done some studies, and they were averaging about 2 suicide deaths for their department for the last 25 years. So basically, they had 50 suicides in 25 years. And I thought, man, that seems like a lot. And so I started studying with him, talking to him, got to communicate with a friend of mine named Dina Ali, who's in North Carolina, that really studies this stuff, and started to learn about what really is going on in this world. And it was overwhelming to the point where I was like, I have to do something. So I kept taking these classes, kept learning. And then I also had the personal experience of interacting with people who we helped get, awareness to, helped with coping skills, and who are still here. And then unfortunately dealt with some people we tried to help who were able to complete suicide later on. And you walk through those valleys with people, and some you help and some you do your best and you can't. And I think that's where I got involved in this. Hey, how do we start teaching suicide awareness? And I truthfully don't call it suicide prevention. I don't like the term, because it puts a lot of guilt on the helpers, the people who are the family members who are coming in trying to help and speak into these lives. And if they're unsuccessful and someone takes their life, then they feel as though they failed them. And the reality is, you can only offer it. The individuals have to make their choice. And so I don't use that terminology very specifically, but suicide awareness is very close and near and dear to my heart, because I've seen it work, and I've seen people who I thought were going to take their life at any moment, who are now have gotten help, maybe for the co-occurring substance that they were dealing with or whatever, but now they're back with their family. They're back in their job. They're not just living, they're thriving. And so I've seen that happen. And it's not because of me, but it's because of people like me who found those individuals and have offered help and said, let's get you to where you need to go to get you the help.
Yeah. And that is so true. And much of the work that I do is in the recovery world for alcoholism and prescription drug abuse and, all sorts of addictions. And I think that the same can be said with addictions. And that is that we're here just to provide the information. That's why I like that you're using the term suicide awareness, and that's what I do too, is just give people an awareness, because at the end of the day, when all this is said and done, people have to make their own choices. We can provide information, and we need to provide the best information that we can and spread it as far and wide as we can. But if you're out there and you're working with someone, whether it's substance abuse or somebody's contemplating suicide, you're providing the information, but you're not responsible for what people do with that information. Would you agree with that?
Definitely agree with it. And I think that's a great way of putting it, is it's basically one of those things where you have to do everything you can to give them the opportunity, and then it's same thing. They have to make that decision themselves. And I've also, one of those things that I think has to be a dispelled myth is that idea that people have heard the terminology suicide is a permanent fix for a temporary solution, a permanent solution for a temporary problem. Sorry, I got that confused. And I've probably said it years ago. And then you talk to someone who's been through it, and it is so opposite of that. It is not a temporary problem they're having. It is a permanent problem. And there is the rarity, and we've experienced it down here a couple of times with some people around here, but there is the rare exception where there's somebody who just snaps one day and just has had enough and just has never thought about it before, but just goes, you know what, suicide's an option, and then just does it on a whim. But it's so rare. It's typically a pattern that builds over time. And what we've seen and what we've experienced is these individuals have finally gotten to a point where they have either been convinced or have convinced themselves that this is the only way out. And what I say to people is, I've experienced this because I have friends, and these friends are people who have gotten to the point where they have a suicidal ideation that is so intense and overpowering that they just don't think they can move on. And so they've gotten to the point where they've either attempted it or have been successful at attempting it. And the ones who have attempted it and have survived, I've talked to a couple of them. I know one friend actually got stopped on his way to complete suicide, and a family member stopped him and found his note and kept him from making that decision. So I've talked to these people afterwards, and I've said, some of them are just amazing people. They're great husbands, wives, fathers, mothers, and I said to the one guy, I said, hold on. I said, your wife and your daughter love you to death. And I didn't know the individual at the time, but I said, how did you get to a point where you thought they'd be better off without you? They adore you. He said, I was convinced that their life was better if I wasn't in it. And if I was in it, I was going to ruin it for them. He said, I said, well, how do you feel about that? He goes, well, it's stupid. He goes, I know now that makes no sense at all. He said, but that's where my brain was. And so these friends and family who I've walked through this with have told me very similar stories. It's everybody, basically, it's the brain convinces you these individuals are just going to be so much better off if I'm not here in their life ruining it for them. And there's just no hope. There's no other way out except for this. And this is the gift of mercy I can give to my family. This is me helping their lives be better. And we all know, we've walked on the other side of this, it's not. You watch the other side, and then as a chaplain, I've done many funerals, and I'm sitting there doing a funeral for, a firefighter who has died from suicide, and I'm trying to explain to the wife and 3 children why that happened, and I can't. And I definitely don't. I definitely know they don't think their life is better without that person there. And years later, it doesn't change. It's a traumatic thing that those individuals have to face. So it's getting the word to people who are at that point that there is hope, there is something else, but it's also getting word to everybody else to be on the lookout. And I use the term relationship. It's building relationships with people so that you can notice a difference and notice a change. Mm-hmm. It's noticing what's happening in their life and saying, wow, this is somebody who used to be happy, cheery, fun, they're miserable. Or this is somebody who used to be a loner and is now hanging out with everybody all of a sudden. Well, maybe life got good for them. Maybe life got bad. Maybe it's not suicide. But if you really know people and you see a huge change, addictive behaviors, there's some questions you can start asking to figure out, where are we at here? And if this is just a temporary little blip in their radar, okay. But if this is something that's long term, we need to step in and get them help before they look to suicide as an option.
So, Jeremy, let me ask you, and before we do, I got a few questions for you, if you don't mind, if you can stay with us. Can you do that?
Yes, sir. Sure can.
Okay, on the other side of this break, well, I'm going to ask you some questions because I just find this to be very, very important and very interesting. And I know the listeners do too. But first, guys, this episode is sponsored by FHE Health. FHE Health has been providing life-changing behavioral health services for more than 20 years. They treat substance abuse and mental health disorders in an individualized and comprehensive approach. Recognizing the specialized treatment needs of the first responder community, they've created Shatterproof, a dedicated program for law enforcement, fire rescue, and similar communities to receive treatment among peers. They're experienced in providing privacy and working with unions for employment. FHE Health is committed to providing the best care experience for our patients, for their families, and for our community. Learn more at fhehealth.com. So, Jeremy, so you mentioned that many people that you've worked with that were in this situation later after getting help and working on themselves, look back and they can't believe that they were at that point. And I know in my own life, in my own recovery, I just mentioned this to somebody the other day, that I look back at my situation, and when I tell my story, and this is almost a decade later, I feel like I'm talking about a different person. And that sounds like what you're describing here, that down the road, people look back and they think, God, I can't believe I was thinking that. I mean, what was I thinking? And let's start off. Let me take this in a couple of parts. First of all, are you noticing any trends? Are there trends that lead to people getting to the point to where they think that leaving Earth in this dimension is the best solution? Is it substance abuse? Is it untreated depression? Or, just from your looking at the landscape, what sort of trends are you seeing that lead to this? Because this can help us sort of address that if we recognize it in ourselves or if we recognize it in somebody that we know. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that, I don't know if there's a specific pattern with specifically substance abuse. And I mean, typically a lot of that goes hand in hand, substance abuse, alcohol abuse, but what that comes down to is unsuccessful coping mechanisms. So you have these healthy coping skills, and so the person who's mentally and emotionally healthy and happy and things are going well, as trauma and stress come to them, they deal with it. So whether it's a hobby, whether it's prayer, whether it's faith, whether it's a conversation, whether it's counseling, whatever, they deal with it. And what I find is the people who, pretty much across the board, those people who no longer find help in the stuff they used to find help in, end up down that path toward suicide, because now this thing that should work isn't working. And actually, even people who use, and I'm sure you know this better than I do, even people who use alcohol and drugs as a coping skill. Some people are very successful at that by, just self-medicating to a certain extent, and obviously not condoning it, but all of a sudden that doesn't work anymore, right?
Yeah,
it's like, This one overcame that.
We always say it works until it doesn't.
Exactly.
It works until it doesn't.
Yeah, that to me, that's the thing I see over and over again. Now, there's a lot of things that you kind of see overlap, but that's the one thing I see over and over again is that whatever that coping skill, whatever it is that made them feel better, just isn't doing it anymore. And once again, some of those are healthy coping skills, some of those are unhealthy, but either way, they're not working anymore. And so suicide all of a sudden becomes a viable option. The other thing that I think for first responders, specifically firefighters, is we experience suicide because we run these calls where you see a suicide. It almost implants that idea in the head. Not that people don't know what suicide is, but when you see it up close, I mean, I've been sitting at fire station houses with people who I think are very, very mentally healthy and emotionally healthy, and the subject comes up where somebody goes, "Well, how would you kill yourself?" I'm sitting there going, "That question just get asked?" Yeah. And of course, because we've just run a suicide call, and so it's a way to diffuse the situation and go, "Well, the way I do it, I wouldn't do it like they just did it." Like, and there's this actual conversation that takes place, and I remember the first time I heard that, I'm sitting there going, "That can't be happening right now. This is bizarre." And then you start to hear people say, "Well, I wouldn't hang myself because it stretches your neck out. I wouldn't shoot myself because it gets blood all over the place. I wouldn't do this. I wouldn't." And you hear somebody give their idea of a way that would be peaceful, and then you have the conversation, you get done, and you walk away, and I think, well, I need to get help for all these people. And then I realize none of them are thinking about taking their life. It's just part of it's part of the deal. It's part of the life we lead, that they know about it, that we all are aware of suicide and what happens and how it's done. So the problem is when a firefighter, specifically a first responder, gets to the end of all that's working and suicide becomes an option, it's a more natural option too, because they see it and experience it and understand it. So all of that kind of goes hand in hand with the people that I've experienced it with and have walked through this with, because I say, wow, you start to put these pieces together, and that's kind of what comes out of it.
Yeah, and I have to tell you, from the police and the FBI side, where I come from, I never really thought of it until I got out of the profession, or I started being around, because what's typical with law enforcement officers and first responders in general, and I'm sure it's the same with firefighters, is that while we're in the profession, we tend to really only associate with people in the profession, which, by the way, folks, if you're police, fire, EMS, or an agent, or the military, that's not a real healthy thing to do. It's good to know people outside of your profession and be involved in things that have nothing to do with your profession. I've learned that over the years. But what I found was, by being in those environments, death and destruction became normalized. I was a big city police officer, and I think there's just the fact that you're exposed to it constantly, that there's almost a normalization to it. And I found myself being able to sit with my colleagues at work, and we would talk about death scenes, like we were talking about the game on television last night, and think nothing of it. And then I would go home and relay the same conversation to my wife or somebody I knew, and they're just horrified, like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you're talking." Yep. And you're like, I remember it just got to the point where, like, I couldn't understand, what do you mean? This is what I did at work all day, and other people aren't prepared. And so listen, this is the helping profession. It is. God bless you if you're a first responder. it's an honorable profession, and I wouldn't change it for the world. I felt like I served the community, but you have to recognize going in, and I don't think we do enough of this with the recruits that come into this profession. When they start early on, you need to understand what this profession does to you. It is not normal. You were not designed to see what you see day in and day out, and recognize what it does to you, but get help early and do all the things that Jeremy is talking about in taking care of yourself mentally, physically, spiritually. You have to take care of all those things.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And that's, we've actually taken it a step further here. And what we try to do with our, we try to make sure that we talk to our recruits early on. So we have a 12-week program, and we spend that first week probably 2 or 3 separate times talking about, here's what's coming, here's what's happening. If you aren't aware of it, here's what's going to be coming at you. Here's the support mechanisms in place for you. Here's how we can help you. Here's how you can get help. And I agree, because of that very reason. The state of Florida actually incorporated an emotional wellness behavioral health component to the minimum standards now. So out of the 480 hours, I think it is now, there's an 8-hour day dedicated to cancer prevention, emotional health, physical safety, fitness, kind of an overarching thing that we helped write the curriculum for. And it's a drop in the bucket. It doesn't handle it all, but at least gets the awareness level at a little higher point going into this job.
Yeah, because I know when I started out in this profession, there was none.
None.
None. And it was, we got to do more of that. And so and the people that you're working with, and when you finally get to the point where, okay, I'm working with an individual and I am going to get them help, meaning Jeremy's going to get me help. You come and you work with me. What kinds of things have you done in the past to help people? Where do you point people in direction?
You mean like when they come to me in crisis?
Yes.
Well, first of all, I guess I normally say this when I start stuff, but I want to make sure I'm not an expert. And I tell you that here on the show, first of all, but also when people come and talk to me, I tell them, I said, I'm not an expert. I said, I will listen to you. You can vent all you want, and I will help wherever I can, but I will try to get you to the expert. So I think, first of all, knowing who your resources are. We have an amazing employee assistance program here, but I'm not gonna lie to myself and think that all 40 or 45 or 50, however many people we have, that all of them are amazing. I'm sure some of them are much better than others, but I've tried to do my research to figure out who is giving us really good counseling and people having good experience with it. So know that, and have those in your back pocket, but also know your recovery centers in the area. Know which ones work, which ones are just in it for a buck. Because if you have that information set aside and ready to go, then you're able to go, okay, this is somebody who's in crisis. Let me go help right now. And I think that's the key, is you're able to step back and go, okay, this person needs help. I need to be able to send them there. So I'll find a good employee assistance program, a good clinician. Another thing I'll do is we've developed a peer support program here, where sometimes there are people who just need to talk to someone they know, someone that's a peer who's been through it and understands that they don't want to go talk to a clinician. So I've tried to encourage our people to start taking some classes on peer support, because then you get ahead of it too, where you can get someone and go, hey, seems like you're in a little bit of crisis. You're not to the point where you're thinking about suicide, but that may be something come down the road if you're not careful. So let me get you to talk to this guy or girl. And so I'll connect them with someone who has some similar experience. Go grab some coffee, go have a conversation. But if someone truly is in crisis, then I think that's when you get the professionals involved. You need to have the people, and I have 3 or 4 counselors who I know I can call them at any moment and go, hey, we got a problem here. I need you to meet with this person right now. So the one thing I'll say is there's not a one size fits all. And I think you know that everybody's different, and we all connect differently with people. So, having a few different options is really important. That's very important. So I know it's a little bit of a general answer, but that's how I handle it. The other thing too is, this is going to sound weird to people who've never talked about this before, but the other thing is you ask straight up. I learned this in the suicide awareness classes I took, is if you really think someone's thinking about taking their life, you ask them about it. And I was always a little weirded out by that, because I thought, well, I'm going to give somebody the idea. And they're like, no, you're not. And I've learned since then you're not. So what you do is you see the path the conversation is taking, and I do a very soft approach to it, and I just say, this is going to sound a little awkward, but I'm listening to you and I care about you. So I'm going to ask you a tough question right now. And the question is this: have you thought about harming yourself, or do you have a plan to hurt yourself? And I don't even necessarily initially use the word kill yourself, but start there. And if they kind of beat around the bush, then I can move to are you thinking about killing yourself? Then you get in a real true class, you get into questions about, what would be your plan? How would you do it? Do you have the means? All those types of questions. But anybody can ask that question. And people hear that and they go, no, I'm not trained. If you have a concern that somebody's really thinking that way, you're like, man, this is a tough conversation. I'm not sure they're going to make it past today. You ask that question, and if they don't sound like they're going to, and you go, hey, would you be willing to let me go take you to get some help? I had a circumstance about 2 months ago where I have a guy that I work with, and I noticed something right away one morning, and I'm like, he's not right. And another person noticed the same thing and came to me because I'm the quote unquote expert, even though I tell everybody I'm not. and sometimes when you get that reputation, people are going to bring everybody to you. But he goes, hey, I'm worried about that guy. And I go, yeah, I'm a little concerned too. He goes, what are we going to do? I said, let me go talk to him. So I had a conversation, and just, and he wasn't responding very much. And I said, what's going on? And he shared a little bit what was happening, what was difficult and going on at the time. And I could tell and I just said, listen, I need to ask you a question. Are you so depressed right now? Because I can tell this is a tough thing. Are you so depressed that you're going to hurt yourself? And he just kind of looked at me and goes, I don't know. Well, that's not the right answer. I don't know. It's not the right answer, because that means he thought about it. So I said, okay. So I asked, what are you thinking? Have you thought about it? And he goes, well, I don't want to be away from my family. So I started appealing to that. Well, let's figure out a way to get you help. So within a day, during that day, got a hold of one of our a psychiatrist we know and a psychologist we know, and they got him in right away and realized that he needed some medication that he had not been taking, and he didn't realize it. Got him in, and within a couple of days he came back and he was a totally different person. I'm like, wow, that was amazing. And all it took was just one question. I didn't do anything except ask the question. The experts did what they needed to do. I don't understand how all that medication works and everything else, but that's what he needed to get him back to where he's supposed to be. Well, all of us can do that, because all of us can say, hey, I recognize something's different here. Let me help. And that's what I try to encourage people when it comes to suicide awareness. Don't be afraid to ask that question, especially the people you care about, because they're not going to go, how dare you ask me that?
No.
I've never had anybody ask me that. Instead, it's, wow, you care enough that I know how hard that was for you to ask that question. You care enough about me to ask that question. So don't be afraid to ask it.
It's funny that you say that, because when I reflect back on my own situation, I, in my career, only had one person ever directly confront me about drinking. And later, when I got into recovery, what irritated me was not so much that individual approached me, but later when I found out there were other people that felt the way that he did and wanted to say something and didn't. That bothered me more than the fact that the guy confronted me. And later, before he retired, I actually thanked him for doing that. I actually think that people, it's almost like they're waiting for somebody to say something. And you pointed out something, and that is that when you make that direct question, that hesitation in the answer tells you a lot about the state that the person is in, because if they were not contemplating this, then the answer would be absolutely not, no, not going to happen. But the fact that there was a hesitation means that there was at least some consideration. And I think that people need to be very cognizant of those clues, that hesitation says something in and of itself. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, totally agree. And I think I've never had anybody be upset about the fact I asked them. I've probably asked, I was thinking about it the other day, probably 15, 20 people. It's not, I want to make sure we're clear. It's not something you just walk up and start asking people, hey,
oh no,
thinking about hurting yourself? Like, it's not, we don't want it to become a flippant thing, but I mean, it's probably 15, 20 people that I've asked, and not one person has ever gotten mad at me. One of those people I didn't even know, didn't know him, never understood, didn't know anything about his story. And he ended up standing on a street corner next to me because he was looking for some help. And I happened to be at the right place at the right time. Initially, I thought it was the wrong place at the wrong time. And he started telling me a story and wanted help. And I just happened to be there. And I just looked at him and I go, listen, I don't know you. I don't know who you are. but you're sharing this with me, so I'm going to ask you a question if it's okay, and it's going to be a tough one. And he goes, okay. This guy was bigger than me, stronger than me, a stud athlete. I'm like, this guy's going to rip me in half when I ask him this. And I just said, I go, it's going to be a tough question, but you seem like you want help. So the question is this: have you thought about harming yourself or killing yourself? And he looked at me, started laughing. He goes, no, not at all. But thank you for asking me that. And we went on our way, and I got him some help. But like, that's somebody I don't even know. It's never been something that's backfired and gone, oh, I never should ask that question. So you feel the situation out and you ask it. But I think your emotion towards that person who didn't ask you is what I hear more than anything else. Why didn't anybody ask me? And I just got to tell you, the people who are listening right now, I am passionate about this because I've been in too many situations where I have sat there late on a Saturday night, late on a Sunday night, late on whatever night it is or whatever day it is, sitting with a group of people who are racking their brains trying to figure out what they missed. And inevitably somebody goes, man, I knew there was a concern, but I thought he was okay. Or man, I wish I had asked him this, or I wish I had been. It's all the regrets. It's all the I wish I had, if only I had. And I don't want that for anybody. It is a painful, painful thing to go through. So ask the question, find out what's going on. And if there's no issue, great, move on to something else. But if there is, you can offer help to them by getting them to someone who can professionally get them the advice they need.
Now, have you done that? Have you made many recommendations to an actual center? Not just individuals and experts, but I mean, like for drugs and alcohol, you can go to a treatment center. Are there centers that people can go to with this particular issue? If you haven't already identified, because as you mentioned earlier, it may be that they have a co-occurring substance use disorder or other known mental health condition. But if you're not aware of that, is there a center, any treatment facilities, kind of like you have drugs with an alcohol?
Yeah, there are some. I kind of stay out of that mode and give that to the professionals, because what I found is you hit it on the head. Most places deal with co-occurring dependencies. And what I found, I didn't know anything about this world at all until a few years ago. But I remember referring someone to a place that I really respect a lot. I'm like, oh, this is a great place. They're going to love it. And I sent the guy to connected the two people, and they both got the phone. He goes, yeah, it won't work out. I said, why? He goes, well, I'm not experiencing anything other than mental health and some trauma. He goes, I don't have any alcohol or stuff. I'm like, what do you mean? Well, to go to that place, you had to have that with it. So I didn't know any of that. So I'm learning about all these terms like IOPs and POPs and all these different acronyms that I couldn't keep up with. So what I've done is, when it comes to those that are specifically just for mental health and suicide awareness, I make sure that the people I know, those clinicians that I respect, they have a pretty good understanding of the networks that are involved and who to go with. And so even just recently, a very dear friend of mine was struggling with some stuff, and I got her to a counselor, and I knew that she was suicidal, got her to a counselor. It was about 3 months ago. And that counselor went through and said, hey, here's 4 options, and here's the order I would recommend them in based on your need. And so then, it's weird, but then it comes down to, well, how much does each one cost? What's covered? Where is it at? Because that's the other thing is there's some considerations to take. There's something to be said for being near your home and being able to go to a place where, family can visit you occasionally. And then there's something to be said for, in certain cases, where you need to be far away from home, where nobody can visit you and you can't just take an Uber home. So there's a lot of factors other than just, okay, that facility is good or that facility is not. The other thing that I found is there are some that are faith-based, some that are not. So it really depends on the person and what they're looking for. Once again, I think that goes back to what I talked about at the beginning. Do your homework. Know what they are. I know around here the recovery centers that are available and kind of what fits the people, and I try to stay out of it so nobody ever thinks that I'm giving them an opinion, or you get that impression that, well, I'm recommending this place because I know the owner there, and or there's some other type of weird thing going on. I never want that, so I try to get them to the right people who make those decisions and are the professionals. Because like I said, I'm a chaplain who just wants to help people, and I'm an EMS captain, so I try to stay in my lane. But there are people out there who can tell you what's really good, and I tell people right now, look at the reviews on it. It's almost sound silly, like a Yelp thing, but look at the reviews, look at the people, the testimonials of the people who've been there, who it's worked for. Find out why it worked, and what are you looking for, and what are you trying to get out of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very well said. And so as we wrap up, any final words of advice for anybody that's out there, anybody that may be thinking about suicide right now? What would you say if they're listening right now?
When it comes to the people, I'd like to take two messages here. One, for the people who are doing well and things are going well in your life, keep an eye out for the people who aren't. Sometimes someone just needs another person to care about them. There's a great story of, my mind is blanking on the young man's name, but there's a great story of a guy who was riding the bus out to the Golden Gate Bridge and was going to end his life out there. And I guess it's one of the places that has the most suicides per year or something like that, because people will jump off the side.
Yeah, I think it's the Golden Gate Bridge, isn't it?
Yeah. And he was on his way there, and he ended up getting off the bus, walking out to the edge, and then jumping, and he survived. Hardly anybody survives. The percentages are so low. And he tells his story now because he's doing amazingly well, and he basically looked at it as life as a second chance. But his comment was, he goes, if just one person on that bus, if just one, had seen me and noticed that something was wrong and said, hey, can I help you? He goes, a stranger. He said, I would not have done it. And so many people who are thinking about completing suicide just want somebody to care enough to stop them, to ask them what's going on. So that's my first encouragement, is be looking for the issues and the people around you and changes so that you can help them. Number two, if you are someone who's thinking about it, find hope. I know that sounds very simplistic, but find your reason. And I know there's a friend of mine right now, and she'll tell you her reason is her two little girls. And the things that have been done to her and the things that have happened to her are just awful. And many people have said, a lot of people would have ended their life with what she went through, but there's something to hold on to. So find your hope, first of all. Number two, find the people that you can pour into yourself, and find help. Find the person who understands you, find the professional, find the facility, do whatever it takes. It sounds very simplistic, and it's very hard to do, because when you're at the end of yourself and you don't think there's anywhere else to go, it's hard to turn it to somebody else, because people who have gotten there typically have been failed multiple times. Typically they have been let down, they have been betrayed, and they're afraid to trust anybody else. And my encouragement to people who are going through that is give it one more shot. Give people another chance. And if they let you down, they let you down, but try it again. You have nothing to lose. And I always tell people, there are people who care about you and would be devastated to not have you in this life. The problem is they probably haven't told you. And what I found is the people who are kind of caught before they are able to carry it out find out how much people care about them and love them, because they sit down with these conversations and they go, oh, wow. Oh, you would be devastated if I wasn't here. And people are just in tears going, yes, I would. I don't know how I would survive without you here. And so these things that we don't say to people, we should, but don't take silence as people thinking that it's going to be okay if you're not around. They probably don't even know what you're going through. So reach out, get help, take a risk, and it's worth it because it could save your life.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And I learned that in recovery myself is, you got to remember that other people are going through their stuff too. And just because somebody that you care about isn't telling you how much they care about you, and you think that no one cares around you, it may not be that they don't care. It's just that everybody's got their own issues going on, and they just may not be aware of the struggle that you're going through. And maybe a key takeaway, Jeremy, to what you're saying right now is that maybe we should do a better job, and I need to do a better job of letting the people that we truly do care about know that we care about them and how much they mean to us. And you never know what effect that will have on someone. that
Sure.
somebody does care about you, and there are people that will help you. Oh, I know one final thing I'm going to ask you before we go is this, because I know I get this from a lot of first responders. Hey, Mike, I would love to get help. There are a lot of people I work with that would love to go to treatment, would love to go to a psychiatrist, would love to go get all kinds of help, but they won't because they're afraid that they'll lose their job. Have you run into that? And what do you tell somebody that tells you that?
Yes, for sure. Well, the first thing I tell people is your life is more valuable than your job.
Yeah.
It sounds very simplistic, but I try to remind people, hey, let's look at priorities here. A job is a job, and I get it. And with first responders, it's more than a job. I totally understand that it's, a career, a lifestyle, et cetera, et cetera. But it is a job, and we can find something else that you can do to make money, to make a living. That's the first thing. Second thing is, don't be afraid of that part of it, because there are rules about HIPAA, patient confidentiality, things like that. It's in my department, I'm very blessed, especially all over South Florida down here. We have some really good departments who've been very progressive about this and tell people, hey, go get the help. We'll figure out the other stuff later. And they protect them, whatever they can to protect them. And if they can do the job, they get them back and get them to do the job. I get that not everybody in the world has that, but you're protected by legality, if nothing else. I get cops have a little different situation, because I get the fact that cops, worried about carrying their gun and those types of things. But I know a lot of police departments are working on that right now. So find out some of the answers. I mean, and you're going to have to look locally at where you're at, look at the resources that are around you, look at your department policies. But I know at least in most fire departments I'm looking at now, they want you to get the help and they want to bring you back. It used to be that it was, there's a little mark on their file, so we're going to have to let them go, get them out of here. Well, the stigma has been reduced on this, so we're starting to talk about it more. That's helping. Just do a little research, and then if you're the person who's in your department and you're doing fine, and there's other people that aren't, go advocate for them. Advocate with your chief. Talk to them about the possibilities.
Yeah, and I think it's true for everything you just said is true for law enforcement as well, that there are all kinds of protections in place, and there's laws in place that will protect you. People can't just fire you from a job because you're seeking help. And I know that in reality, we want you to get the help. And I've often said this, is if your job is what you're worried about, you not getting help is what's really going to place your job at risk. Not getting help is what's going to put it more at risk.
That's a really good point. And as I teach around the country, I guess this is my chance to plug my little side business. That since I didn't have a chance to do that yet, I forgot to. My bad. I work I have my own business called the Hurd Group, and the Hurd Group basically teaches in fire departments, police departments, and municipalities, and that's why we do it. Because I want to be able to change the environment. I want to change the conversation. And I've taught all around the country. And I've taught in road and bridges areas. I've taught in police departments, fire departments, et cetera. And regardless of what position you're in or what department you work for, it's one of the concerns. And I get it. So we've had the conversation of exactly what you just said. If you're concerned about your job, then go get it fixed, because this is the way to continue keeping that job. But how do we get you the help? Well, let's talk about what awareness there is, because some of the help you can do yourself. So that's what we train on. We teach people, here's the coping skills, here's the coping mechanisms. And then if we need to get you to the next help, it's not me, but I can help you get there. And so, if people need to get a hold of me, I'm happy to give my number, my website, whatever you would like to give out there. But man, I'm all about trying to help people. My tagline is serving our public servants, because we have people out there who just see a lot and have dealt with a lot and just need someone to be in their corner. And sometimes we can walk into a place and go, hey, I know you guys say you care about your people, but here's something you can implement so that your people actually feel cared about. And that's what we want to do, is change the conversation.
Absolutely well said. And with that, so Jeremy, how can somebody listening right now, if they want to get hold of you, how can they get hold of you?
The best way is my phone number. It's my cell phone number, 561-254-7791. That's 561-254-7791. I may not answer it the first time because I want to make sure that you're not trying to sell me a car warranty, like most people have to deal with. But if you leave a message, I will get back to you, and I'm good about texting and I think that's an easy way to keep up. And also, my Instagram, Facebook, I have the Hurd group. You can connect with me there if you'd like. So the Hurd group, it's HURD, the Hurd group, both of those as well. And then the hurdgroup.org is my website. Any of those ways will work. But honestly, just text me, give me a call. I'm always happy to help. And sometimes that help is, hey, you're calling me from Portland, Oregon, and you need help. And my task may just simply be to take the next 20 minutes to find somebody out there through the network that I have to get you help. Or maybe it's, hey, we want to have some classes in our department. Let me know. We'll figure it out. I got some great instructors who can teach, and we really want to help people get that awareness out. So any opportunity to do that, we've got to get this. We've got to stop this before it gets to suicide. We've got to stop this before people start suicidal ideation. We need to stop this back at the first part. And you've heard Gordon Graham, if you've ever listened to him, talk about the Swiss cheese. And if one little hole doesn't line up, you can stop it. And that's what we got to do, is we got to get ahead of this and help people when they get hired and when they're early in their career, have an awareness of what mental health is and how to cope with the things they're going to see, so that suicide doesn't even become an option. And that's what we want to get to.
Yeah.
So any way I can help you, please call me. Let me know. We'll help wherever we can.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And Jeremy, I really do appreciate you coming on today. And folks, I hope this is helpful for you. You got his information there. We're also going to list his information on my Facebook site, my website as well, some of the information, and reach out to them, get help. If you're in an agency that's looking for training to be done, you see that the Hurd group does training, so invite them out to your agency to get that done as well. Because if you're a police executive or a fire executive, first responder, or any other group, by the way, it doesn't. I know we talk about first responders here quite a bit because that's my background and Jeremy's background. But remember, this applies to anybody out there. So if you have a company or a corporation or a group that you think would benefit from a talk like this, then certainly reach out to either me, Jeremy, and if we can't get you a solution to whatever it is that you're looking for, we will do the best that we can to point you in the right direction to get to the solution that you can. So again, folks, with that, this episode's been sponsored by FHE Health. According to SAMHSA, first responders are 30% more likely to develop behavioral health conditions like PTSD. We've just been talking about that now for this episode. FHE Health specializes in getting first responders better and cleared for duty, and find out more at FHEhealth.com. It's FHEhealth.com. So as I'd like to say, I don't represent any group. I don't represent anyone other than myself. My only purpose in giving this information to you is to share with you what I've done, because it's helped me and maybe it will help you too. So if I've said anything, or if Jeremy has said anything that doesn't apply to you or you don't agree with, just discard that. But try to take on any information that you can use for yourself and help others as well. Because you know what? Sometimes you just pull out information that might be that missing link or that key. So that's what we do in recovery. We help ourselves along the way, and we help to impart the knowledge that we've gained to others as well. So with that, please visit our Facebook page, which is Recovery is Possible, and our website, which is VanMeterWellnessSolutions.com. And let me know how I'm doing, and let me know if there's a topic that you're interested in hearing. I'd love to hear from you. So folks, take care, and we will see you next time.